So I'm going to have to splice these together and do real work. Okay, so I want to just jump in and say something about why I wanted the three of you to be together. I, like Laurie, came to the end of my U.S. academic, sojourn, and I retired actually in 2006. And the three of you got together, and we had first a conference that was a closed group, and then we had a conference that was open to other presenters, and they did this collection, this volume, a Jihad for Justice, right? You think I remember the name. In any case, in honor of my work. Some of what you guys were saying about the maliciousness of some of the patriarchal trying to claim Islam as their Islam is the Islam. Some of that was obviously problematic for me, but not as much actually as my feeling that US academia was not going to be the venue for the production of new knowledge in Islam. And once I got wind of that possibility, I think I just didn't want to go anywhere else. So, in the 15 years since I retired, it's pretty much confirmed that the leading of Islamic thought is not from US academia. Yet for, yes, and Juliane has put in the chat the link to the Jihad for Justice, because it's an ebook, so it's available online, so you can get it. And actually, some of the people in the gallery wrote for it, and many other wonderful people. But the thing was that I didn't see myself as much at the end of academia as I was, but with this collection, like the effort that was made to pull this together on my behalf, I think I want to say it was one of the best things that happened to me in all of the years that I spent in US academia. Because first of all, the three of you are very serious in terms of your own, however fickle, Laurie, in terms of your own contributions, dedications, and research in Islamic studies. So to acknowledge me and my work, and to also find, a couple dozen other people who acknowledged me and my work was just the most wonderful thing that happened to me, because I actually feel like academia should have been my natural home. I come from a poor family, and no one in my immediate siblings ever went to the university. And I have 3 degrees. In fact, that's what my mother described it as. I just know you have all them degrees. So that already kind of set me apart from my family. But what was the motivation was my own kind of geek interested in knowledge and learning and experiencing other ways of seeing the world. And so that's been my life trajectory, really. And to come to the end of my tether with regard to US academia, and to have 3 scholars whom I respect and love treat me and my work that way was just something that I'm incredibly grateful for, even still. It's also a great volume. It's just as far as what people said and how far they went to get different people to speak back. But the very idea, I don't know if you remember that movie, The Beautiful Mind, where they put the pen on the table. It's the boys' club. It's like all men in there, and they they put the pen on the table as an acknowledgement of the scholarship of someone who is leaving. And I felt like that. I felt like, okay, well, I really worked hard, but for some reason, there's certain corners of the academy where I don't get the reception that that hard work was at all fruitful. Obviously, I'm over that because I see that there's fruits that come in many different ways, alhamdulillah. But I think instead of being depressed about, leaving the only job, really that I've ever had and being jobless for 15 years, I instead was just so honored. And the particulars of it were very meaningful. It was not trivial. And so it is that level of respect that you have shown for my work while I respect your work that really, really made me want to bring the three of you together. I actually think that Juliane has written more about me than anybody that I know. And so she's got some interesting volumes there, and also because of the way that she, as a scholar, looks at the ground, looks at what's happening, and yet at the same time does a very German thing. It's very analytical. Kecia already knows that she's my favorite Islamic scholar of all times and all places. So I will just continue in that location. I'm so amazed by her, and I'm so in awe of what she puts together. Case in point, when she did the first article and the AAR presentation on just the sheer quantitative citations of the male scholars with regards to female scholars, it was so transformative. It's just, I'm like, it's not me. It's not, like Laury, I can't control my mouth kind of thing. It's not me. They are really doing this. And she made it, she diffused all of the tension that was there, because it was like, okay, it's just in your face. Either you're doing it or you're not doing it. And I just thought, oh my goodness. So I'm so in awe of the work that you've done. Actually, Kecia was the only person that ever made a critique of mine in the volume on progressive Muslims about, the Quran centeredness of my work. We've talked about it since then, and of course life has shown that there are different ways in which you can approach that. But I remember that because it took me several years before I could say anything to her about it. And Laury, with the We Are the People, actually just kind of quieted down for me some of the opposition to the female-led prayer, because it reminded me that I'm part, of this tradition. I'm part of the Ummah, and my part may not suit everyone, but I still have membership. So I really specifically have appreciated the scholarships that have come, from you ladies, and that you also saw, to focus some attention on my work. So I'm deeply honored, and it, keeps me sane in those moments when my insanity is greater than what allows me to go forward with life. I have to say one last thing before opening up, and that is that I've told Laury this, that when she started writing the fiction, she asked me if I would read it. And I thought, okay, well, Laury's my friend, and I'll do this for her, but I'm probably not gonna like it. I love her work. Oh my God, her fiction is just so amazing. So if you have not read her fiction, one is called The Lover and the other is called The Jealous. You should definitely order it, because you will really, 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 really see why. It's just amazing. She has the ability to see in historical context in a way that's clearly informed by the scholarship, but also tremendously by her own imagination. And I'm very pleased that you ladies all agreed. We will allow you to talk to each other if you would like for a little while, and then in 5 or 10 minutes we can see what's happening in the gallery as far as comments and people who want to be acknowledged. You might want to just say, I'd like to say something right now so I can recognize you in the chat. To each other, you would like to say?
I'll say something, which is, it's really been wonderful actually hearing these kind of overlapping recountings of the ways that our paths have intersected and overlapped and diverged. And I'm really glad, Amina, that you mentioned that closed door workshop, because that was, I think, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 before we did that conference. And Aisha Hidayatullah helped organize it. Fatma Sidat from South Africa was there. Sadia Yaqub, who I think was maybe even still finishing her dissertation at the time. Hina Azam, who was my classmate at Duke, actually, and is now tenured faculty at UT Austin. And what was so astonishing for me in that moment was actually being in a feminist space within Islamic studies where half of the scholars were focused on law, right? Because that's not a thing really that happens, or certainly it wasn't a thing that was happening, 5 years earlier. And it's really a rare thing that happens now. And I think, the insight about the various kinds of methodologies that we use, we're in a very different place in 2020, even if there are some people who don't really recognize this, right? We're in a very different place in 2020 than we were even in 2006. But I've been recently doing some work looking at the 90s. And I just really want to emphasize again how important Quran and woman was, not as the final word, right? But as the sort of opening salvo in a kind of conversation that's become so much broader. If it weren't for Quran and woman, and then Leila Ahmed's Women and Gender in Islam, which was published the same year. I mean, 1992 was a really important year. None of this would be possible, right? And I think part of what, I don't remember if it was Juliana's idea or Laury's idea or Aisha's idea after this workshop to do the Feshlift, right? That became a jihad for justice and to make it open access. It wasn't mine. Although I saw readily enough how important it would be. What people didn't give you as a scholar, as a woman, as a Muslim, as a Black woman, as a hijabi in the US Academy was the complement of taking your work seriously as scholarship. Not that nobody did, but broadly the academy didn't. And part of what we wanted to do with that volume was, yes, do something that was sort of the kind of thing that you do, for the Germans when they retire, for the men, for the Orientalists, for the philologists, but also do it in a way that wasn't just an attempt to say, look, she succeeds by your terms because we've done this thing, but actually say, we're going to take this kind of vessel, we're going to take this kind of symbolism, and we're actually going to make it open access. We're going to democratize it. We're going to take this thing and subvert it to our own purposes, right? And let there be fiction, and let there be poetry, and let there be essays. And yes, let there be academic articles. And then we're simply going to make it freely available, because that's exactly what your career and your scholarship has been about, right? Is about making knowledge accessible, and refusing to follow the script that says you only deserve to be taken seriously if you do it in this particular way. So thank you for that.
I feel like Kecia said it all. That was really, that was an extremely important gathering that we had, very moving for all of us, and that it was closed door and private, and that we were all able to sort of say the things that meant so much to us in a really safe way, and disagree sometimes strongly about things, and work that all together. But what Kecia said about the Feshrift, to me, this is it. Is that that Amina deserved to have this, and she deserved to have it in a way that deconstructed all those norms that had excluded her. And so I can't add anything else. It was my honor to take part.
I'll just add two things. One is my partner Jamil still calls this closed door workshop the summit. Not a summit, it was the summit, and there's never been one like it after that. And also, I want to remind us that it wasn't only the Festschrift, but also the conference that at Boston University that was in your honor, Amina, that was explicitly built around the same idea of here are ways to recognize not just broader questions of Muslim women and the challenge of authority, which is what we called it, but also make central your own work. And we were honored that you were there. I vividly remember the moment when we gave you the volume. As I said in the chat, I'm still insanely proud of this volume. It's actually the best thing I have done as an academic, because it is subversive and because it just does so many things. I direct people to it still all the time. I cherish my own hand-printed paper copy that I own. I mean, it's been an amazing journey with all three of you. I'm starting to get emotional, so I will stop here before the German starts crying on camera. But it's just really profound. And for me, that summit was actually my first sort of own initiative to say, I have something to say in this conversation. I am part of something. For me, academic work really only is meaningful when it's dialogical, when there are people to talk to. And I like what Kecia said earlier about not only criticizing, but also building. I think of my own work in that way, but I also have to perpetually remind myself that building is not what academics are encouraged to do. And so I want to at least briefly mention that having taught at this public university for 9 years now, I still get pushback about whether I somehow skirt or transgress this boundary to the normative, the prescriptive, the too feminist, the too religious, even though I don't see my own work as explicitly quote unquote theological. I experience it as constant pushback. And I know that, that's probably part of what your experience was too, in very different ways, in very different embodied ways. And I want us together to be proud of resisting that. I still have to care a little bit, but I'm also in a better position to just say, if this is not what you think scholarship is, do I really care? No, not so much anymore, right? So I would, at this point, I have thought about leaving the academy many, many times. There are moments where it's just really too much of all kinds of things, where I feel like being part of it is legitimating all the abuses that are happening and all the marginalizations and all the oppression, including the financial oppression of graduate students, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I've also sort of about twice a year, I make the decision to stay because at this point, it allows me to do certain things in certain ways while acknowledging that I also don't really know what else I would do. I don't think I will write novels, so.
Okay, so we have some comments, and if I am not mistaken, the people who've made the comments are willing to jump in to do them because nobody said anonymous. So Eleanor Holland, do you wish to speak to the gallery?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm
Salam.
academic. I'm a calligrapher. I'm an artist, but I don't know how much I want to say about myself. I'm a Muslim. I come from a long, many years of being in a tariqat and have reached a point of no longer being able to tolerate the patriarchy. So I'm just looking for like-minded women. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in religious studies and kind of been around a little bit, but I'm not an academic like y'all. Yet I'm, you know, stuck in the Islamic world, and I'm always dealing with Islamic texts, and I love the text. But anyway, I'm just looking for sort of community. So I appreciate listening, although I can't relate to all the issues with academia.
Thank you. Farah, are you willing to make your comment to the gallery? Did we lose her? This is the thing about monitoring. I have to like see in the process.
Actually, she answered to me privately so far.
Oh, okay. All right. So Annie, I know you will join us.
Yeah. Greetings, everyone. Salam alaikum. I'm based here in Los Angeles, founder and president of Muslims for Progressive Values, and I find these meetings really inspiring, and also motivates me to keep going as well, because of the challenges of building community, which is very, very challenging. My question to the scholars of Islam here: why is it that, like Juliane was saying, that you are discouraged from building? And I think because as a community organizer, we validate the way we practice our Islam. We live, we bring what is black and white text to life. And what you have created, you have given us the oxygen in order for us to do the work that we do, and justifiably so in the context of Islam. And for me, I see a total allyship and a validation of your work at the community level. And I find that a lot of time folks in the academia are very, obviously with exceptions in your cases, but for the most part, there is a distance between not wanting to get your hands dirty. And I find this very frustrating, because we do book readings and we use your books, and that's how we promote the progressive and inclusive Islam and the justice-rooted Islam. To Eleanor, I don't know where you are, where you live, but you know, we are in the United States and other communities in Europe as well, so feel free to reach out. So if you could answer that question, that would be really appreciative. How can we build the community with academia? That would be fantastic.
Yes, ladies, you have the floor.
Juliana, I think this one's for you.
Really, you think this one's for me? So I'll sort of try and not make it academic, because I think there is sort of a personal dimension to that. I think one of the things that I expected to sort of get out of becoming Muslim was a community. And I would say that I've been searching for a community, and that I've spent a lot of time in the past 20 plus years feeling like there are communities and I'm just not part of them, which is probably the most human of feelings about community and belonging. And I'm also an immigrant, so belonging in the United States is a very, very tricky thing, let me tell you, especially as a Muslim. And so I think I have come to a place where, one, I have realized that community is what you build, not what you join, that there is a huge difference between expecting to find the right people and then be with them. Like Eleanor, I was part of a tariqa for a long time and it didn't go very well. and there were huge issues, social kinds of issues. I live in a place here in Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill doesn't even have a mosque. I don't know if I would join it if it had one, but at this point, it doesn't have one. And so my community has always been, or is now much more one that I built. It's a community with some of my graduate students. Some of this is just about healing. It's a virtual community with all these wonderful people. I was scrolling through the gallery and I was seeing so many people I know, many of whom I've met in person, which I'm very, very excited about. So, and the relationship between scholars and grassroots activists, I think is complicated on the scholar side because I have experienced the analytic sort of tendency that I have, and that is sort of my job, as potentially paralyzing for activist work, because we overthink, we consider too much of what could, you know, be problematic about it, problematic being one of our very favorite words. And so I don't make a distinction anymore between my scholarship and my activism. I have considered writing this patriarchal Islam book as a series of blog posts because it might do a different kind of work. So, and I mean, I will say there is a specific dynamic in Islamic studies that has to do with anti-Muslim hostility, with the history of religious studies in the United States and Canada, where constructive work, the building work that, Ani, that you're asking about, is really not encouraged because it's considered suspect. It's considered something that's not real, objective, male, white scholarship. These are the criteria, right? And we are, at this point, I experience the work I do as subverting and resisting. As Kecia was saying, it's about finding resources in an academy that are not meant for the purposes that we use them for. Hello, UNC. And doing things with it that the institution as part of the system is not intending to happen, and to do that until someone tells me that I can't do that anymore. I approach the American Academy of Religion in a similar way. I'm all about making trouble in all the work that I've done there because I think it has the potential to be subverted in that way and be used in that way for the purpose of change and at the same time a kind of community building.
Any other responses? Because we have some other comments in the chat, or we can move on. Laury?
Let me just say one brief thing, if you don't mind. One of the things that's most interesting to me as I do this work on the woman question in Islamic studies, which is the book about the gender politics, is looking at the way that religious studies as a feminized discipline and women's work within religious studies and non-binary scholars work within religious studies as sort of suspect, particularly when it seeks to be constructive. Really interesting if you contrast it with, for instance, work in, say, international relations that's intended to have policy dimensions, or security studies, right? There, people don't say, oh, that's just practical or applied or constructive. It's not objective. We can't take it seriously, right? There, the fact that it's meant to actually have some kind of impact is part of what makes it valuable. And so it's, you know, it tells us something when work that we want to have, we want to see have impacts on the ground is stigmatized as therefore not serious.
I just want to, it's not speaking to Annie's question, but related and going back to Farah's question, which is in the chat, which is about sort of creating grassroots change in challenging contexts and traditional and patriarchal contexts. And maybe this is going to sound weird, but I found it impossible to do in those contexts, and that there was a certain point where I was constantly engaging in these contexts in a good faith manner, and really trying to see if I could bring people into conversation. And my husband Mike, he says to me, you know, why are you talking to people who don't think that you're fully human? And I was like, wow, okay, this is actually a fact that was just relayed to me. And I cut everybody off, and I stopped doing that. And this is sort of around the time that El Farouk and Troy and I were just talking about just building something. And so I think one of the things that we've seen happen is that if you build things without worrying about what other people are going to say, you have to protect yourself in certain ways, but you build, you know, like Dr. Wadud has done. She's just built over the years, right? You build. There are all these people in those contexts, in those traditional patriarchal. I don't even want to say traditional because they're not traditional. I really want to push back against that, right? This is this notion of tradition that, frankly, they've put a lot of energy into telling us is tradition, when in fact historically, you know, it's a very particular viewpoint, a very particular argument that's not that doesn't even accurately give us an account of how things were in the past. So that's why we call it neo-traditional now, because it's sort of a romanticization of the past. But, you know, so in these patriarchal contexts, you know, and these you know, homophobic, anti-LGBTQ contexts, this kind of stuff, you know, you just build something new, and then there are these people who are in there who need your voice, and eventually they hear it in some ways through social media, through others, through personal accounts, and they are drawn into these larger conversations. And Farah, as you know, I mean, there's people doing LGBTQ activism all over the world, and you speak to people who then hear that one voice, and that one voice is everything to them, and brings them, and maybe they build their own space. So I feel like it's a much more organic thing that should not be that we should stay away from engaging with them in a way unless somebody's got the energy to do that. And there was one thing I wanted to say, but now I'm forgetting because I'm having a senior moment. But there was you know, I think the thing is that you build things, and then when people come and they hear it and they respond, and we do it in this kind of organic way, is what I wanted to say. It was the healthiest thing for me. I personally couldn't take part in those conversations anymore. And I do want to add too that, like, I feel like the activism I'm doing now, writing it, my activism is in my novels. Like, if you read my novels, you can see I'm doing very, very serious work about sort of opening up this idea of what tradition was, and talking about the past as this very complex place with these very complex human relations and human experiences as well. And so anything you do can be activism that reaches people. And my biggest fans actually turn out to be Salafi, Hanbali, Niqabi women. I've got a big group of them who really, really love the books, because I've got a Hanbali hero in there who's just this sweet guy, you know, and he goes through some struggles in the second book, which one of them found disturbing, but she went through the struggles that he had to go through. And one of the things that he has to go to is that he betrays his own conscience by listening to you know, to tradition in a way that leads him away from his heart, and he has to struggle with that. So creating these kinds of discourses, I think, can draw people in these myriad of ways. So I just wanted to say that.
Farah, do you want to share?
Yes, please. Thank you. I just want to take a minute to say something, and that's this, that it's wonderful to see all of you, as I have over the very many years, support one another and build communities of support, collegial support, academic support. But I also want to take a minute to really acknowledge that your work is still the work that I build on, your work, all of you. I still remember the day, Amina, your books have arrived at my home in the post. Kecia, I remember the day I ran out to get your book. Juliana, your book, Peaceful Families, is one of the first books I ordered in my new job, to make sure that wherever I work, these books are available to the students there. So it's ways that we create communities that support one another to build on the work. And it allows me to do the kind of subliminal activist academic work that I do, whether that's quiet or whether that's open. And Laurie, I have to admit that your work, your activism work with the Unity Mosque is still very dear to me, even though I'm not wasn't directly part of that process. I'm very aware of what the Unity Mosque does. I fully support them. I go whenever I can, but it gives us hope. These kind of intercollegial subliminal spaces that all of you have created really are still the tools. You are the giants upon whose shoulders I still stand. I'm forever grateful. Thank you.
Alia? Yes, you mute. Down at the bottom, there should be. Nope, you're still mute. You're still mute, John. You're still mute.
Hello, Amina. Okay, thank you for asking me. I've sent some questions anyway, but no, I've thoroughly enjoyed knowing many of you. And I'm so delighted I've got to know you all personally. I haven't met Kecia, but other than that, I think I've known all of you. I think without you all, we couldn't have, the activists like me, couldn't have done the work in the field. And you've been such a huge support and so on. So I'm sorry to hear about academic and the difficulties, but don't ever give up hope, because you are remarkable scholars, remarkable women, and remarkable activists. So that's all I need to say. And thank you for including me, Amna. I hope you're keeping well.
Thank you. Missing you.
If I could just say, I mean,
come and see me. Laurie doesn't come to see me either.
I just want to say, I mean, if people who don't know Alia Hogben is one of the great activists in Canada, you know, with the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, who has transformed the face of Islam here in Canada. So, you know, I mean, I can only offer you that it's an honor to be in any space with you.
Thank you, Laurie. Margot comes to see me, doesn't she? Hello, Margot. Thank you, Amina. I'm going to leave you now because I have some people downstairs.
Okay, salam alaikum.
Yeah, wa alaikum assalam.
Saima, you had your hand up. You still want to share?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amina Jan. Oh, the sun just came out literally this moment, so you get to see that too. Thank you so much to everyone for sharing, and to Dr. Wadud for creating this amazing space for all of us to hear from you. I feel like this is such a juicy example of all four of you as academic activists, as Juliana so beautifully described. It used to feel to me that academia lives in this ivory tower that isn't connected to real life. But now I feel like there's such an increase in especially female academic activists. And my question was, is there an increase in academic activists, or has this group always existed and social media is just allowing more of us to hear from you? Thank you.
I guess since I'm writing about academic Islamic studies, this is on me, right? Okay. Yes, there are more Muslims in Islamic studies than there were in US academia. Yes, there are more women as a proportion of Islamic studies academics and people researching Muslim women. It's certainly not unprecedented. But if we look, you know, at who was in these jobs in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, it looks very different now than it did. And this is one of the things that we learn when we learn about misogyny. I recommend Kate Mann's book, Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny. She's a philosopher. It's very philosophical. She's got something else coming out that will perhaps be slightly more readable. But I recommend the first book anyway. You just have to drink a lot of coffee while you read it, or tea. she really talks about the way that part of what's prompted more virulent forms of misogyny is precisely women's progress, right? So the old forms of sexism, right? Women just aren't competent, don't work. So now you have to have a new story. And I think that's part of why we see the kind of really vicious patriarchal backlash to women, Muslim women, Muslim feminists within the academy, is partly because, to the extent that we have been successful in some ways in changing the conversation, there's a need to delegitimize the project. I mean, using a very different example, this is Carol Anderson's logic in the really wonderful book, White Rage, which is basically a history of white backlash from Reconstruction to, well, Obama's election, actually. And the new edition has a postscript after the 2016 election illustrating why we find exactly that form of backlash. So where was I going with this? Oh, so there are more women, and there are, I think, more Muslim women, and there are more scholar activists. But I also think part of what we're witnessing is the breaking down of certain kinds of boundaries. It used to be, and what we're doing right now in this moment is a really good illustration of this. It used to be that, you know, the talks we gave at our mosque or to our student groups on campus were very different than the things we did in the undergraduate classroom, which were very different than the things we published for our specialized audiences comprised of colleagues within our disciplinary subfields. Now on social media, any of that may be accessible or with, you know, lectures posted online or any of these things, which is really good in some ways because we have democratization of access, but it can also be really difficult because it's very easy for things to be flattened and taken out of context. So the kind of thing that I'm going to say in an introductory book to women about women in Islam for an undergraduate audience is very different than the thing I would say to people in an advanced undergraduate / graduate seminar. But, you know, if little bits and pieces of things that I say in one place and another can be taken out of context and put in a mishmash, and we see, oh, well, these are contradictory, or it makes it very difficult actually to navigate those particular challenges. So I do think you see more scholar activism. I think that's partially an artifact of how public and accessible certain kinds of things can be. And I think there is a real upside to that, but I think there are also very real, I mean, I can say dangers and have it really not be an exaggeration, but I also think just sort of pitfalls in very mundane kinds of ways that when you confuse the levels of analysis and the projects that underlie these different things, contradictions sometimes appear where there really aren't contradictions if you look in a more nuanced and careful way.
If I can add just one thing, I think too there's a greater visibility of queer scholars as well, and we also have within the context of Islamic studies more Black scholars coming up as well, and the mere presence of the voices of Black scholars of Islam, queer scholars of Islam, cishet women speaking has been extremely disturbing to the status quo, as we recently saw in a listserv for the Islamic AR group. And so the mere fact of the presence and the speech and the demands to have a voice and not backing down and the kind of terror that it has incited in those who have always felt that they controlled the academic narrative, I think is a really great sign that's falling to pieces. It always feels like they're going to hold on, but my sense is that nobody's going to stop speaking. And so all those diverse voices are really going to come forward and push this whole thing over. And I just wanted to write into that list at one point, but had given up, just say it's too late, guys. Just, it's done. Go get a cup of coffee because it's over.
Suri, do you want to make your comment, or you just want to leave it in the chat? Let me know.
I'll just leave it in the chat, but I just want to just do a big shout out to everyone and say thank you so much for your amazing work, really, as an activist. I know, Juliane, you were saying like sometimes that the complexities of academia and whatnot make it challenging sometimes for activists, but I just want to say that I think like the rigor that academics bring to our work gives me so much courage to actually bring the work forward and do the work that we do, because the strength of the rigor provides a strength to the arguments and then gives me the courage, at least, to face up to patriarchal arguments that are made, on the ground. So thank you so much.
Eileen, you wanted to share?
Okay. I'm not a scholar, so I usually don't comment or contribute anything because as less than a scholar, I don't have much worth sharing. But I wanted to share a little bit about my reactions to this series. I came to Islam in my 50s, and like Laury talked about, I was a feminist, and it was extremely important to me in order to become a Muslim, which I started out researching to hate and ended up changing. But I knew I would not wear a hijab all the time, and if I had to, I wouldn't become a Muslim, and it had to be in sync with my feminist values. So I came to understand that the core of Islam was pro-woman. And I read Vernici's book, and I read Amina's book, and they helped me feel confident and able to be a Muslim and be true to my values. And like Laury, I started running up against, dogma and culture and rules, but I guess I was old enough and stubborn enough that I wasn't going to change and be forced into anything. But I'm also a people pleaser, and I can't stand disapproval. So I really was uncomfortable, but I stuck to my guns. And I think initially I was able to do it because the Sufi group where I converted was supportive and focused more on the inner and the spiritual than the, legalistic rituals of compliance. And I did go to some mosques, but I would end up so angry when I left over, you're going to burn in hell if two hairs are showing, and you've got the khutbah was like shake the ground under the enemy's Islam, and you're going to burn in hell if you have riba. And I would leave so angry that I felt like it was a threat to my faith. So I stopped going to any mosque except the Sufi one in Philly, which I moved away from in 2008. So I found myself in the middle of rural North Carolina for a few years. And I think I was the only Muslim in the county. And I didn't tell people, and people didn't know. When I moved down there, being older, the heat got to me and I started wearing shorts. So I never greet a Muslim if I'm in shorts. But I haven't had community, and I've moved to Richmond in the last 2 years, and the mosques around here are mostly like one ethnic group or another, the women speaking a different language, and they're all far away from me. And I did recently go to one that was from W.D. Muhammad's group, and I liked it, but immediately COVID came and everything shut down. But I have to say that I get a couple, I'll probably tear up here. I get a couple emotional reactions when I hear these meetings, these discussions. First of all, I get so excited I just love I love the material. I love the brains. I love intellectual stuff. I've always loved school. And it's so inspiring and exciting to me that I immediately want to read every book you've written. But I have 2,000 books, most of which I haven't read, and I'm trying to downplay because I'm going to be 77 this week. I'm trying to get rid of them. And I can't keep buying books. And the library around here is not a place where I could get any of these books, but I want them. The other thing that makes me sad is that I feel I was born 30 years too soon, because if I was born later, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional, I'd be one of you. I would have done it, but God had other plans for me. I got married and had 3 kids before I was 23, and I got my degree after that. But, you know, I'd love to take, now everything's Zoom, maybe I could audit some courses, but my activist days are over. I'm not involved in any mosques. Right now I'm participating in some activities around racial justice, and I'm in a Muslim Jewish women's group. But I have to say that Amina Wadud and Renisi got me here, and I don't know how long ago the online progressive Muslims email list was. I think it was in the 90s. But that, and then how it morphed into MPV, I have to say, is my community. That's been my lifeline. That's been my community. That's been the validation for the way I practice Islam and not feeling guilty about it. And so I'm really grateful to everybody that's participated that and been there for me. And I think it's just wonderful that I get a chance to listen to all of you. So that's it.
Thank you for sharing. I have a private message that I'm going to read out, and then we're going to have to wind down, I'm sorry to say. And the question the comment and question is, thank you so much for the conversation, for all the work that all of you have done for scholarship. I'm a design scholar, which is also having its moments of reckoning with colonialism, patriarchy, racism, etc. today. Still a lot of work to do. I was wondering if you could point to some material practices that create safe spaces for this kind of feminist or otherwise inclusive work in Islam. These might include artifact making, meaning making, space making, and just any example of material practices. Anybody have any recommendations?
I can't think of anything material beyond just finding. I mean, I think the thing that we're hearing a lot of people say in the texts and here is that we need community. And so making community however you can find it, that the loneliness we feel, there's this idea that there's this ummah out there and that we're all part of this larger community, but we all know the divisions are very, very real, and not just between the various kinds of Shia and the various kinds of Sunni and all the rest, but even within these smaller groups, that the divisiveness is something that can be extremely disheartening. And so finding community wherever you can, whether that be online or otherwise, so that you have some sense of a path forward.
I am finding that amongst the queer activists that they are actually forming networks that allow them to do other forms of expression, and that actually teach ways to integrate rather than to have things always be sort of in separate silos. But I don't have a specific reference, so I'm sorry about that. Eleanor offered if anybody was interested in calligraphy, so those people who are connected to the page, I think, can connect with her there. I just want to say, one of the reasons why I, came to this idea about friends along the way is because as an analog woman in the digital age, I have understood that the alienation that I often feel in terms of specific compositions of community, especially as an African American woman who's Muslim, is so graciously balanced out by friends that maybe I don't see them all the time, or, you know, like with COVID, we're doing more meetings and stuff like that. I keep making jokes on my social media because I'm retired, and yet I seem to be doing more interviews just because everybody's online now. But I really, I really feel the grace in the possibility of being in touch with people, even if I do not get to sit down with them. You know, we did our 2 Eids online, and I gave khutbahs for both of them, by the way. One of them was here locally in Indonesia, the same group that we did Tarawih with online, and I led some of the Tarawih prayers. So I'm really resonating with the fact that I have been really fortunate in my life to be able to withstand the vitriol, patriarchal spewings of the academy, and at the same time am so much more enriched, and therefore I'm learning to be grateful, and therefore give much more attention to people like Dr. Juliane Hammer, Dr. Kecia Ali, and Dr. Laury Silver, among many others, obviously in the gallery. So I want to say a thank you to you for joining me. I hope to see you again, and I will make available a consolidated copy of these 2 separate recordings, because that's what ends up happening, which means it'll take me a little bit longer, but I will share it with you, and otherwise I will only put it in the Patreon page that I started as a place to have community, by the way. But in about a week, I will also make it public, because I really think that it's worth sharing with everybody, because you're worth sharing with everybody. So thank you. Thank you all the members of the gallery, especially people who made comments. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. And I look forward, by the way, the next Friends Along the Way is going to be with Dr. Hatoun Al-Fawzi, who's from Saudi Arabia. And the one after that is also already planned, and Sadia Sheikh has already agreed. So I am really going to, I enjoy these tremendously, you know, so I'm really looking forward to continuing it, and also I'm grateful for your support. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Very wonderful.
Thank you so
Very
much.
wonderful.